Hello, this is Domenico with another Paper 3 practice. In this video, we're going to calculate consumer surplus from a diagram that is provided to us. We're going to use this figure that's been provided on a Paper 3 exam. They can provide you with figures with values on the y and x axes, and from that you can make a calculation. This is part of a series of videos. I think this is part 6 of a video where we're just tackling a lot of different concepts from elasticity, of demand and supply, also plotting average fixed costs, taking into consideration tax impositions on a PES value that is 0 or perfectly inelastic, and so on. So in this video, which will be relatively short, we're just going to practice calculating. We're going to do this question E here. It asks us to calculate the consumer surplus before and after the imposition of the tax. And that's carrying over from the previous video where we were working through this series of questions from A to D. And our workings from that question are seen. We have a perfectly inelastic supply curve, PES. The PES value, which is representing the percent change in the quantity supplied divided by the percent change in price. And since we have a fixed number of seats available within the stadium, 80,000, there's going to be no change to the quantity supply. So we have a value of 0 divided by any change in price. I can raise the price up or down, and doesn't mean that we're going to build or destroy seats in the stadium. So essentially the PES value is 0. So we have a perfectly inelastic supply curve, which makes sense since the quantity supply is fixed at 80,000 units. So in those previous videos, we imposed a tax. In this case, the tax is $100 per ticket. The price paid by the consumer is unchanged because the PED value, is going to be greater than the PES value. The PES value is 0. And we know with prior knowledge that the more inelastic the demand curve, the greater the tax burden. The more inelastic the curve, the greater the tax burden relative to the other party. So in this case, it is the producer. The producer carries the full tax burden. The consumer does not carry any of that tax burden. The producer carries the full tax burden. So the price is unchanged at $500. That's equal to the price paid by the consumer. And then the producer will have to subtract the tax of 100, and the price received by the producer is here, P for price received by producer. So the purple shaded area is the tax revenue that's collected and given to the government. In that previous video, we see that the green boxed area is the profit generated by the producer from the sale of 80,000 tickets at $500 minus tax revenue minus costs. And in this question, in the videos, we saw that there's no variable costs, we only have fixed costs, and the average fixed cost per ticket is $150. So this is reflective of costs of production. What we have up here, this blue shaded area, is the consumer surplus. I'm just going to label this, I'll just type it in, consumer surplus, which is illustrating what a consumer is willing to pay versus what they actually pay. So you might have someone willing to pay $1,000 for the ticket, but the ticket sold at $500. They actually pay $500. So the level of savings, that consumer surplus, is $500. Maybe you have someone else that's willing to pay $700 per ticket, but they actually pay $500. So the level of savings at that point is $200. So consumer surplus you can think of as kind of the level of savings, what you're willing to pay versus what you actually pay. And so this question is asking us to calculate the consumer surplus before and after the imposition of the tax. And since the PES value is 0, we know that the consumer surplus before and after the tax is the same. There's no change here. So I'm going to ask you to go ahead and pause the video and just go ahead and calculate the value of that consumer surplus. Pause the video now. Okay, so let's check your work for question E. The consumer surplus is calculated as, here we can see, as a triangular area, and it's going to be the base of that triangular multiplied by the height of that triangular area, and then that all of that divided by 2 to get that triangle. So that can be equal to the consumer surplus in this case. So the height, or the base here, the base going from 0 to 80 is 80,000. We have a base of 80,000, right, which is going from 0 to 80. There we have our base. All right, that is the base right here. Then we have our height, which is this value right here. The height is going to be equal to 1,000 minus 500. 1,000 minus 500 is that height. Perfect. So let's go ahead and calculate that and then divide that by 2. So 80,000 times 500 is going to be about 40 million. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, or we can just say 40 million. But then we have to divide that by 2, and so that will equal 20 million. Or 20 million. So there is our consumer surplus. Before the imposition of the tax was 20 million. After the imposition of the tax, it's still 20 million. The consumer does not bear any of the burden of the tax because the PES value is 0. The producer carries the full burden of the tax. And that's it. Very quick calculation for practice. If you have any questions, feel free to comment those questions below, and don't forget to subscribe and to like. Thank you so much.